There's a lot of advice floating around online for filmmakers. Some of it's great, and some of it's not. I've been doing this long enough to hear the bad advice over and over. So today we're going to break down the advice that I've heard that I think could hurt your career, or at least waste your time. If you're new here, my name's Keaton. I'm a filmmaker based in Oklahoma. I also developed this app called CineTemp. CineTemp's a quick way to calculate the white balance of a location. And new in version 2.0, we're also able to calculate and estimate the ND needed for a given scene. Now let's dive into point one, and this is the misnomer that good gear will get you work. I've had it said to me that you need to buy better gear to get better clients, and I don't think that that's necessarily true. I've been in the industry a little over a decade, and obviously there is a place for good gear. There's a place for buy once, cry once scenarios, especially on certain types of gear. But in reality, I don't think that clients are hiring you based off of the gear that you bring to set. They're hiring you for your reliability, your creative input, and your consistency that you bring to set, not the camera body that you're bringing to set. So if older me or present me was talking to younger me that was just getting into the industry, I would advise myself not to fall into the build it and they will come mindset, especially in this industry. I think that it's applicable for certain scenarios in certain industries, but not necessarily for ours. To me, owning high-end gear doesn't necessarily create demand. It just creates hard costs. I think that there's too many DPs and filmmakers getting into the industry that think gear equals credibility, but on the contrary, I think that reps and continual projects is what creates that credibility to clients. And what I mean by that is gear doesn't necessarily mean credibility. Now, I think that there is certain aspects where it can help, but overall, I think that execution equals credibility, especially in today's market when we have cameras like the FX3 and the Pixis 12K that can deliver a beautiful image at a relatively lower cost than what we've seen in the past. Now, another note that I would make to myself as a younger filmmaker, if current me was talking to younger me, is that gear does not equal growth. I think if I was getting into the industry for the first time and I was wanting to hear advice, I would want to hear you need to focus on the business aspects first. You need to focus on streamlining your communication processes, and you need to focus on building repeat clients and create systems that are dependable for you and are dependable for your clients. Now, I say all of this, and I own quite a bit of gear, and some of it is pretty nice gear. So I think that there is a time and place to have nice gear, obviously. But I don't necessarily think that a filmmaker jumping into the industry needs to invest all at once, or even if you're already in the industry and you're aged into the industry and you've been here for a while, you don't have to buy everything at once. I think slowly building your roster of gear and your collection of gear is a good thing that you can do over time. I think that there's smart times to invest in your gear, not necessarily buy everything at once. For example, I've had some long-term projects that had gear rental included, and then rather than renting gear, I just took that money and then offset the upfront cost of that gear and then made my money back on the back end through other projects. But I think the bottom line is that sustainable growth beats impulsive gear debt almost every time. Now let's move into section 2, which is not everything needs to look natural. I want to be careful on how I word this because I think that there's a time and place for almost every lighting style, but I think that we've fallen into a trend right now where everything has to be soft and almost feel unrealistically natural. And I think that we need to lean and look back into our inspiration for our lighting. In my opinion, great cinematography is not about soft light, but I think that we've fallen into a trend recently where we see a lot of soft light implemented on almost every scene because we have the power and the technology to do that, especially with some of these new LED fixtures that are coming out. But I think it's really important, especially if you're a DP, to understand why you're lighting things in a certain way. And you don't need to be afraid of using hard light. In my opinion, hard light does not look wrong, and we don't have to avoid it on everything, including the faces. I think that it can add shape and texture and drama to certain scenes. It can obviously make a product stand out, but it can also bring intentionality to your scene if it's used correctly. I think as filmmakers and DPs, we need to take a step back and restudy and watch the films and commercials that we used to love. You'll see stylized lighting used to intentionally tell the story and shape the story. I think as filmmakers and DPs, it's important that we keep an eye on the trends that are happening, but that we don't necessarily chase the trends and try to apply that to every project. We need to chase the emotion behind the project. In my opinion, the best DPs, whether it's commercial or film, aren't necessarily always lighting for the most flattering light, but they're chasing the light that fits the story best. Now, moving on to the next section, this is a big one, is the low rate promise. And this is something if you're early in the industry, you'll probably come across. I heard this a lot early on in my career, that they wanted to hire me for a discounted rate and then engage me and hire me at a higher rate on future projects. In reality, I think that seldomly works. If a client approaches you and wants a discounted rate, it's typically because they want a deal, not because they want to test you for bigger projects. But I think that you have to use your judgment, because if someone approaches you and it's at a discounted rate, but it's a project that's almost a passion project for you and you'd want to do either way, then that can be good. But if it's perpetual work that you don't necessarily want to do, I think that can be bad. You're going to be the one that teaches others how to value you. There's a difference between doing a favor and then being someone's favor. The bad advice that I've heard is to take every project that comes your way. And I don't think that that's necessarily a good fit for everybody. I think that there's value in reps, and I think that that's one of the most important things that you can do as a filmmaker, but I don't think that every project fits every filmmaker. That being said, whenever somebody approaches you and they need a favor on a project or they want a discount, you need to ask yourself, is this something that I would want to do whether it led to another job or not? Now, of course, just like any other section, I do think that there's nuances to this. I think that there is times where a genuine client needs a discount on a first project, and then that leads to other future projects that are good paying. But in general, I think that good opportunities, or the best opportunities, are built on mutual respect, not discounts. Now let's go to section 4, which is talent is all that matters. I think that this is a hot topic because I think that a lot of people are striving and chasing to be the most talented filmmaker on the block. But I think that there's things that are more important than just having talent. This is just to counter anybody that ever tells you only the most talented filmmakers will get the job. Because like we've covered in past videos, I think the filmmakers that stay booked are the ones that show up early, solve problems, especially if they solve them calmly, make their clients' lives easier, and they keep iterating and improving, especially when nobody is watching. Now, I've actually seen this happen in my own career. I've been up for jobs, and I don't think that I was necessarily the most talented DP that was up for the job. But I do my best to make clients' lives easier and serve them in the best way possible. And I've actually been told that that was the deciding factor on why I got certain jobs. I think that there is a list of the best that don't land certain jobs because maybe they're unprepared, or they're unreliable, they're hard to communicate with, or they're generally just hard to work with on set. I think that consistency and attitude go a long way in this industry, and that's what turns one job into 10 jobs. Now next, I want to talk about some advice that I had heard early on, and that's to never work for free. I think that this is a nuanced conversation, just like all of the points, but I think that there is value in working for free, especially early on in your career or for certain projects that are your passion. I think early on in your career, free work can buy you experience and can buy you reps and can also buy you a portfolio. All that being said, I do think that you have to be very strategic in how you approach free work. If current me was going to talk to younger me, I would just say that if you're going to take on free work, make sure that it's something that either A, gives you full creative control, B, allows you the opportunity to build a real portfolio, or C, gives you some really good connections for future projects. I think free work can be very valuable, even at this stage in my career. I think that free work can sometimes lead to future jobs, especially when you're able to put your own creative stamp on it, but it can also lead to consistent clients. All that being said, I would say never to work for free just to please somebody. Do it to progress. There's a lot of advice out there for filmmakers, some of which is gold and some of which is garbage. But the key is knowing what advice to embrace and what advice to ignore. Your career will not be built on shortcuts, but staying curious, showing up, and then learning what matters most. My name's Keaton. I'm sharing my journey and what I've learned along the way. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue growing together, consider subscribing. This is just the beginning of the conversation.